I wanted to be a journalist growing up, and I always thought I could never do that. It's not statistically probable, so I didn't do it. And now it's kind of a full circle thing. So just being your authentic self really helps. And that sounds really cliche. I feel like a lot of people in media, everybody kind of starts to sound the same. Like I just say what I feel, and what I feel is sometimes not what everybody else feels. I would say like leaning into what you actually know a lot about and what your actual strengths are, not just trying to do everything and be good at everything and say everything. You can't cover the main team, but you live in a city that has a G League team. Like the G League does not get a lot of coverage. And so when I was starting on the beat, I was like, I need to work my muscle of just like being in pressers and asking questions. And I always go to community events because at the end of every community event, you get 5 minutes to ask the players questions. And normally there's not a lot of reporters there. So that's when I'll ask maybe more personal questions or maybe things that are a little bit more uncomfortable. My advice would be to probably not quit your job until you have something lined up, just because.
And welcome back. This is Doc Williams with Build With Me, and we have the pleasure to be with who today?
Noa Dalzell.
Noa, thank you so much for being here today. And where we're at? We're at Summer League. What day is this?
This is Summer League. This is day 3 for me.
Okay.
So I got in
awesome.
Friday morning. It feels like I've been here a month.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been 3 days so far.
How are you doing with the heat?
I can't stand it. I'll be honest. I'm the biggest wimp about the heat. I keep reminding myself there's also a heat wave in Boston right now where I live, so I'd be suffering anyways.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good mindset. I like it. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and yeah, we'd love to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to Northeastern. I grew up in Boston, have lived there all my life. Lifelong Celtics fan. I can't deny it. I've said it too many times, but yeah, I started covering blogging for the Celtics last summer. So for a site called Celtics Blog, which is a part of SB Nation. It started off like super informal. So I was writing like 1 article a week. Didn't think that it was ever going to get me to here or to be able to actually have a career in this space. And then kind of just escalated from there. So I started freelancing for like a million different places and talking to people and started doing video coverage and all sorts of things. And as of a week from now, I'll be doing this full time. So really excited.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about the transition, like you were saying, guest starring, writing, all those things. How did you make the in? Did you have a friend and talk to him? Did you just do cold outreach?
Yeah, it's a good question. So last summer, I'd been working as a lobbyist for the last few years since I graduated college. And I just felt like I wanted to do something else, like in addition to that. And I've been a huge NBA fan. And my favorite website that I would always read the coverage was Celtics Blog. And they posted, like, we're hiring for new bloggers this summer, which I guess they do every summer, but like in a 1-week period. And I happened to just see it. So I applied, and it was writing a writing sample. It was right before Jaylen Brown signed his extension. So it was like writing an article about his extension, foreseeing, what it would be and whatever. And so wrote that, got the job, and then it was kind of a lucky thing because I realized now, being in this space, how much it helps to know people. I didn't know anybody. I just happened to see the listing, and I just worked really hard on my writing application and applied. And then once I got in, then it was all about meeting people in the space. And once you have credentials, I feel like that changes everything because you're able to network, you're able to get to know people, players, PR, all that. But at the time, it was just lucky that I saw that listing, and that I was actually on the way back from New Hampshire on a hike, and they said, please submit the article by tonight. And I wrote the whole thing in the car for 4 hours. I was just locked in on my computer. So
That's
well
awesome.
worth it.
Congrats. Okay, that's awesome. And then from there, did you start doing game coverage? Tell me a little bit about your path with it. Was it very specific articles where you're deep diving and talking to media crew? I think you did one about the media team for Celtics, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So tell us like how it went through and your style of writing.
Yeah, so I think for me, I love basketball. So I've played basketball my whole life. My dad played professional overseas. So I always kind of joke, feel like basketball is a religion in my family. We're the closest thing we have to it because we're not a very religious family. And so, but the X's and O's wasn't what motivated me personally. Like I know there's a lot of people that do that really great. I love the storytelling, and I love being able to tell stories about players, about their families, about how they fell in love with the sport, about kind of off the court community things. That's what drew me in. And so when I started, we got like a quota. So I was supposed to write like 1 or 2 articles a week. And so it was in the off season. So I just started thinking, let me write about Drew Holiday's philanthropic efforts when he got traded to Boston. Or, I interviewed Derek White's dad. That was one of the, the first stories that I wrote. So it was kind of just writing about stuff that I was curious about. And it was an opportunity to reach out to people. I reached out to people on LinkedIn and Twitter. And, it was harder at the beginning when I had 50 followers on Twitter too. Like nobody really wants to respond. It looks like I'm not even a real account. But yeah, once I started writing those stories, that was all in the off season. I realized like what I was good at and what kinds of stories I like to tell. And then during the season, you get in the regular game coverage and the post-game pressers, and not every single thing that I wrote this year I would hang up on a wall, but the things that I wrote when I had the time to actually dive a little deeper are the things that I was the most proud of, like the features on athletes and more of the things that you don't see on TV, effectively.
I like it. And then from there, where did you think like the pop off moment happened? Because on Twitter, definitely, I saw when you had a few hundred followers, and then it seemed like during the playoffs and everything, it just popped. Where do you see that inflection point of what happened during the season when you were covering them?
It's a good question. So I will definitely say I think I benefited from the playoff run and I remember being, watching the Nuggets run. All of a sudden I knew all the Nuggets reporters were, because I wanted to get the finals coverage, and who better than the beat writers. So I definitely think a lot of people, followed me, and I engaged with a lot of new people just being on the ground at all the games. But the other thing that really helped is that I was only writing for a long time. And then at one point, Bobby Manning, who is the Celtics reporter for CLNS Media, was like, hey, I'm doing a post-game show, like if you want to jump on. And I thought it was a thing on Zoom. And so I was like, yeah, I go on Zoom all the time. Like I'm on my computer, I'm a lobbyist, I meet with legislators. And so I was like, that's fine, I can do that. And then he showed up with cameras after the game, and I was like, oh, I can't look, I don't know how to hold a mic, like I've never done this before. But he kind of let me just work through it. And so I started filming like the post-game recaps and, actually talking with a mic and clipping those and posting them on Twitter. And I think that helped kind of like put a face to the person who was writing the stories as well. So I think that really helped too, when it was more than just the articles. It was like the articles and then also the game recaps. And also I post like every single clip of every single thing that anybody said on the Celtics. So anybody that wants that stuff, like you can find that on my Twitter too. So it was just a mix of things, but I do think the video coverage really helped me, because it was never my plan. Like I never thought that I would want to do a podcast or talk in front of a camera. I was always a writer. And so it was something that was just kind of thrown my way, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll do it.
That's awesome. And then if I'm remembering correctly, you also did dailies videos. Was that the finals, or when was that?
Yeah, during the finals. So first, I'll just say it, covering the finals was like such a dream come true. And I was also working my full-time job during it. So it was like a dream come true, but also a little bit of a nightmare because I wasn't sleeping at all. And it was just a lot going on. But I thought to myself, like, I get to be here, right? I get to be in Dallas covering games, and I get to be in TD Garden until 5 a.m. after the championship. And I'm seeing all these things, like hearing things and seeing the players. And I felt like there were so many stories to tell that wouldn't be able to be worked into an article. Like I just wanted to just talk about the finals. And I think my friends and my family were kind of sick of me talking about it. So I ended up starting a YouTube live series, and it was just every single day, whether it was at practice, whether it was at the airport, at shoot around, after the game, before the game, I would just go live on YouTube and just say, like, if anybody wants to just ask questions, I'll literally just go through the chat and answer all the questions I can answer. And so that was a lot of fun. I think that also helped with like more people who were like diehard Celtics fans who needed more than just what was available on TV. It was like another way for them to engage during the finals and all the anxiety around Porzingis and everything like that.
That's hilarious. Well, that's really good. Yeah, and I think seeing just how much people responded to you on Twitter, on YouTube, your following really changed during this last really spring. It looked like online.
For sure. I mean, I had 30 followers when I started like in September. So I didn't even really know how to use Twitter. I was figuring everything out. I never had a Twitter before. I'd always just been like a free roamer, like just on Twitter without an account. And then I think the playoff run, there was so much more tension on the team. And so shout out to the Celtics for giving me a little bit more of a platform and winning the championship.
I love it. So let's talk about, there's a few aspects people always want to know. Number one, they feel like, well, you're an outlier. Like I could never do that. What would you help people to think about or try to do this if they were going to do it in 2024?
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, like I wanted to be a journalist growing up, and I always thought I could never do that. It's not statistically probable, so I didn't do it. But I also think that just being your authentic self really helps. And that sounds really cliche, but I feel like a lot of people, in media, everybody kind of starts to sound the same or starts to criticize people or whatever. And everybody thinks I'm like a cheerleader. I think that's been a little bit of my impression, or at least my persona on this beat. But in reality, I think like I just say what I feel, and what I feel is sometimes not what everybody else feels, because I just have a slightly different view on things. And I think then it created, and not that my view is right, but it created, I got like a following from the people that agreed with how I see things and how I talk about things. And so I would say like just try to be yourself and talk about the team and about basketball. And if you're not like an X's and O's person, don't be an X's and O's person. Like I'm not a draft person, which is ironic because there's a lot of draft stuff happening here. But, I didn't know a lot about the prospect. I didn't watch a lot of college basketball. So what's the point of me going out there and writing a bunch of draft profiles that I could anybody could do if you go online and find the stats. But I didn't actually know that much about the draft. So I just didn't cover it as much, So I would say leaning into what you actually know a lot about and what your actual strengths are, not just trying to do everything and be good at everything and say everything. Because there's already enough people. There's so many people in the space, So I left the draft alone.
Love it. But now you get to see him here.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Then
I'm
now
learning
you're
now.
catching up. So I think you did something or asked questions to maybe J.D. Davison yesterday.
Yeah.
And a few others, yeah.
I love the main Celtics. That was one of the things, I guess that's another piece of advice. If you can't cover the main team, but you live in a city that has an NBA team, a G League team, the G League does not get a lot of coverage. And so when I was starting on the beat, I was like, I need to work my muscle of just being in pressers and asking questions. And it can't be that I'm practicing on Joe Mazzulla, I should be practicing on a little bit of a lower level. So I ended up going to a lot of main Celtics games, and Blaine Miller, who was the head coach, was great to work with. He was super nice. It was just me and him doing a 10-minute presser, and he just took it seriously and, was willing to answer all my questions. And now it's fun because all of those guys like J.D. Davison and Jordan Walsh, I feel like I've watched them so much that I love talking about them because I actually know what I'm talking about because I watch them so much. So
that's wonderful. And so let me ask you this. When so you're seeing JD, you're seeing Jordan Walsh and all those, and now Jordan's going to be with the bigger club, most likely, or depending on what happens. Yeah. How is your relationship? Do you ask different questions every time, a little bit deeper, or are you realizing that, I'm trying to build a larger narrative for the season? How do you go about building that relationship throughout the year with the players?
Yeah, it depends. I think when you have the opportunity to talk to players one-on-one, which is not very often, covering the Celtics, then I feel more comfortable asking certain questions that maybe I wouldn't ask in a presser, just because there's a level of vulnerability that's removed when you don't have a bunch of cameras in your face and 30 reporters and ESPN and NBC. It creates a little bit of a sense of I'll keep things close to my chest. So I always go to community events because at the end of every community event, you get 5 minutes to ask the players questions, and normally there's not a lot of reporters there. So that's when I'll ask maybe more personal questions or maybe things that are a little bit more uncomfortable. And then after a game, I'm not going to ask anybody a super tough question because A, they just played in the game, so they don't really feel like being self-reflective, and B, it's just a different environment. But covering guys, there are certain players I feel like I've been able to develop a little bit of rapport with, and then others you just feels like you're just asking them questions and they're answering, but it doesn't feel like there's a personal relationship there. I always reference Xavier Tillman kind of randomly, but he's somebody that I feel like every time I ask him a question, feels like I'm building off the last time I asked him a question, and that's just the way that he is. He always says hi, he always says how's it going, and so those kinds of guys I feel like you can build off of, whereas some players it almost feels like you're back to square one every time, but it's okay because that's the job, right?
I love it. And just a few more questions. Thank you so much for this. So let's talk about what was your background? What did you go to school for?
I studied political science.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then so you were balancing, what was the full-time job and doing this?
So I'm an alternative protein lobbyist. And so I basically also known as a vegan lobbyist. So advocating for more plant-based meals and more meat alternatives that are sustainable and healthy.
Do you think, what skills did you take from that and doing all of that? You were talking about being on Zoom. What do you think that unfair advantage or what you learned in that now translated when you were covering the team?
Oh, so much. Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know that I would have been ready for this out of college. I needed those few years in the workplace. All that lobbying is, for people that aren't familiar with that term, it just means you're talking to policymakers and you're writing things about the bills that you're advocating for. So it's talking and writing, right? And a lot of times it's talking to people that are important that you only see on TV. It's a little nerve-wracking, And so it ends up being a lot of the same skills of talking to players and coaches. You're not always talking to friends, when you go in a legislator's office who hates your bill and hates everything you stand for, it's it's a little bit of a stressful environment, and going into a post-game conference after a team just blew a 30-point lead is also that. So I think there's a little bit of there's some parallels in just dealing with the stress of it and just feeling comfortable. And I always feel like the first couple times that I grabbed a mic in a press room, it's felt like testifying in favor of a bill at the State House. So there's a lot of overlap for sure, even though the content is obviously very different.
That's great. No, we're always talking about ones that are trying to break in to lean on their transferable skills. So just a few more. So you write a lot. what was one of the stories that didn't come out that you wish came out this year?
So a story that I was working on that never got published.
Yes.
I tried to publish most of the stories that I was working on. There's something that's still in the works, and I just keep hitting like a writer's block with it. It was a story. I interviewed a bunch of Celtics fans about what the championship meant to them, and my goal was to have it come out like at the buzzer and have this huge collection of stories of all these fans and like what the championship meant to them. And that's when everybody would have really cared, because the championship had just won, so everybody cared about everything. But it just wasn't ready in time. Like, I was in the finals coverage and everything, so it's still there. The fans that I interviewed have messaged me a lot on Twitter about it. It will still come out, but it will come out like later in the summer. And I wish that it had been ready for the finals, like right when they won the championship, because I knew they were going to win the championship. So I started working on it like in January.
Oh, wow.
At least I felt pretty confident. So that's one thing that I'm a little bit regretful. And there was a couple other stories. I was working on something on O'Shea Brissett, and that just never got worked together. And now he might not come back, so maybe it won't be relevant anymore. But I think just you have to make some concessions because you're juggling so many different things at all times. And I was covering the WNBA as well. So, I had to take some losses, and those were some of the few.
Okay, well, that's excellent. Now, let's talk about, well, some people ask questions about, okay, I want to do this full time. Like you were saying, you're transitioning to doing that. What would be your guidance? Some people are like, okay, go for it. Quit the job, do that. Some people think it's not practical. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I didn't know that I wanted to do it full time the whole time, because I also love my current job. So it wasn't like I was one of those people that, I hate what I'm doing and I just want to get away from it, and this is an outlet. Like, I liked everything I was doing, but it just became too much at once, I think. My advice would be to probably not quit your job until you have something lined up, just because, if you're stressed out, then, I don't think that really fosters like your best performance and creativity. If you're sitting there being like, I literally need to make money right now and I'm stressed out and I had a job and I walked away from it. So if you can do what I know a lot of people in this space do and keep your job while you write part-time until you have a full-time offer, like that would be my recommendation. I got pretty lucky. Like, my plan was to do this for like 3 to 5 years and then eventually to try to get a full-time job. And the fact that it happened after 1 year, like, I'm very, very grateful for, and I did not expect. But even if it had taken longer, like being able to work 9 to 5 and then go to TD Garden and cover a Celtics game, like I could have done that for a few more years, So I would say just like take your time and be patient, but also like lean into all different kinds of things, because what I wanted to do was just write about the Celtics. And I ended up writing about the WNBA and podcasting about the Celtics and doing video coverage and like doing a lot more things than what I thought I wanted to do. And I think that made it easier for me to find a job, because it's a lot harder when you only do one thing. And a lot of people write about the Celtics and a lot of people want to write about the Celtics. So I think it helped me a lot that I kind of like by accident became more versatile. It wasn't my plan, but things kind of just fell into place and I ended up just doing a whole lot of things.
Excellent. So they're winning. Well, they just won the championship.
Yeah.
We're here at Summer League. And by the way, is this your first Summer League?
It's my first Summer League, yeah.
Okay, what did you think about it? Well, you're in the midst of it, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, the coverage is really cool just because like I got to watch the Celtics game. Was that yesterday? Yeah, yesterday. And we're sitting baseline, I can hear the conversation. So it reminds me a little bit of covering the G League in that sense. And then it's cool, you're just walking around and it's like every third person you see is like, oh, that's an NBA player, like that's an NBA coach. But I'm still getting my hands, like I'm still figuring out exactly how this works and like what the best use of my time was. Like my favorite player all time is Isaiah Thomas. And I saw that he was like doing something at Foot Locker. I was like, do I go to Foot Locker and like maybe get a media interview, or do I go to Summer League and like do the whole thing? And I ended up going there and I got to talk to him, so it was worth it. But it feels like I kind of don't know where to be at all points. So maybe in a week I'll know like, okay, this is how you do it. Right now I'm still figuring it out.
All right, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I think there's no right answer.
Yeah.
I think it's just everyone's in town, so it's kind of just whatever and finding a spot. So no, continue to tell us what you think of it at the end.
Yeah, definitely will. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, I just love being around basketball. So there's so much basketball here. This is like me at my happiest. So I'm enjoying it.
I love it. So final two questions. The last one, what are we to expect? You were saying going full time. Can you say what you're going full time?
Yeah, I actually haven't tweeted it out yet, but I can say it. So
yeah.
I'm going to be covering women's basketball full time for SB Nation. And then I'll be reporting on the Celtics for CLNS Media, which is where I started my video coverage. But I'll be launching like a podcast and doing like a much more like real job there. So doing both of those, my goal was to be able to cover women's basketball and the Celtics. And so it worked out really well that they're both letting me do that. So I'm really excited about that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
And then one last question we always ask our different guests, and when we're doing this series, what question would you want us to ask you?
Ooh, do people usually have an answer for this? Because I'm
It's
stumped.
like 50-50. Some,
Let me think.
yeah, some were like, oh, and then kind of like go into like a story, or they're like, I wish we went that way with it.
Well, I like the questions you've asked. I always love talking about like career and advice. I feel like maybe one day I'll be like a career counselor. That was always what I wanted to do when I was younger. But maybe about just like where I want to end up
Yeah.
ultimately in this space.
I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so I think I've been thinking about this a lot because as I was making this transition, I was kind of weighing a couple of different options. And I think the main thing for me is that I really want to be like a local beat writer. And I know a lot of people, they want to cover like the NBA at large, they want to be on ESPN. But like, I love the experience of having like a connection with the Celtics fan base and being able to be at all the community events and the meet and greets. And so basically I want to be able to cover the Celtics like the best that I possibly can for like the rest of my life. Like that would be my goal. Not becoming like a national NBA person, which I know like is appealing in some senses, and maybe I'm riding the high of the championship, but I do really love the idea of like having that local connection because I worked remote for a long time too, and just like being at the championship parade and having fans come up to me and be like, oh my God, I read all your work. Like that was so awesome to have like that connection with people on the ground, and just being able to cultivate that over the next however many years, like that sounds really awesome to me. So that's my goal.
I love it. Well, we can't wait to see all of that journey play out next year and beyond. And thank you so much for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.